I can't adjust my mic. Of course, for some reason, my mic arm, doesn't stay. Maybe I need to, tighten it or something. But yeah, you don't want to hear about this. But this, I don't know, the, knob here or whatever is already, as tight as it goes. So I don't know why it behaves this way, but whatever. My boom arm here. Thanks for those of you who hung out for the Super Bowl show last night. There's still time, baby. Go check that out. I do have plays on the Super Bowl. I will reiterate them here one more time. Go watch that video for my actual analysis on this. And those are the ugly props that I have are no score in the first 6 minutes, -124. Shortest touchdown in the game, under 1.5 yards at -175. Going to get the tush push going on for that one. Either team scores 3 consecutive times at -155. And I know I'm laying some wood on these, laying some lumber. Xavier Worthy receptions over 5, -137. Although this one is all the way up to -180 now. So, I still don't necessarily hate that, but there might be other ways to play that one. And then Saquon Barkley rushing yards under 112.5. Although I guess I should actually probably look and see what the number actually is now on that. I'm going to look at that right now because I actually still have not played that one yet because I'm just waiting to see how high the line gets on that. Let me just see real quick. Barkley rushing yards. I still see the numbers kind of all over the place. It's still basically in that same range, so I don't know. It looks like it hasn't really gone up that much yet, but maybe during the day it will. We will see. And then I am going to have 3 college basketball plays, even though I think there are only 7 games. I have an opinion on every college basketball game today, and I'm trying to no, don't bet on this. But I think that these are decent bets. They're all home favorites that I'm actually betting on, so we'll see. And then I'm skipping NHL and NBA, although I will talk about them. There's not a whole lot going on as far as that's concerned. But let me put my plays in for college basketball in the banners here, and then I will talk about them. Hold on. If I remember what they even are. And I will talk about every one of these college basketball games, I guess, because there are only 7 or 8 of them or whatever. And most of them are big conference games. So some of the Sunday games, Super Bowl Sunday, it seems like there are always a few decent college basketball games. So let's get into it as I can't get my camera to adjust again. There we go. All right. College basketball. Actually, yeah, how many games are there? There are more than that. Actually, 8. So Rutgers at Maryland is going to be the first game up at noon on Big Ten Network. And I am going to play this one at Maryland -9.5. And Ken Baum actually has this line at about 12. So he actually has Maryland as the significantly better team. I don't disagree with that at all. Maryland, he has them at 18th in the country, and they are ranked 18th right now. So that's the ranking's about accurate. He's got them 20th in defensive and offensive efficiency. Very balanced team. Very unlucky as well at 304th in locks. And Maryland, their team has been flying under the radar, and I kept saying they should be ranked. Now they are, and they're ranked appropriately. But Ken Palm is still telling you that maybe the record should actually even be better than it is. They play at the 74th fastest tempo, and Rutgers is way down somewhere, 67th. He has them below 50 in both defense and offense, 93rd in defense, not very good, and 106th in tempo. Does have them a bit unlucky and having faced a difficult schedule, but although not like Maryland hasn't faced a difficult schedule. But Rutgers, yeah, they don't play quite as fast as Maryland does. Maryland, I think, is going to speed this up, and it's odd to see this number go down from 11.5 to 9.5, so I don't know if there are some injuries coming into play or what, but like I said, Ken Baum has this number closer to the opening number here. And I agree with the Maryland side. 53% of tickets, 67% of the cash. So it does look like the cash percentage is coming in on Maryland. And it's pretty simple. I mean, Maryland is definitely the better team. They're good at home. I think they're 4-0 at home in conference play, although they haven't won by margin in most of those, which I'll show that in a minute. But Rutgers, they're coming off a couple of huge games, man. I mean, they've actually played a slew of pretty competitive games here. Hanging in this game against Penn State where they almost covered and probably should have covered. They covered by a half point for me against Michigan State, a big performance there. Didn't suffer from a hangover there and beat Northwestern on the road as an underdog, so pulled off an upset there. Then they hung close with Michigan, and then they pulled off the upset over Illinois at home in their last game. So that's a big win, man. I mean, that game for Rutgers is not going anywhere this year. But that really was like their biggest win of the year, I would say, because they don't have any other like big wins here. So they're coming off their statement win of the year pretty much against Illinois. Now they have to go on the road, even though, yes, they're an East Coast team, out to Maryland. And, yes, they did win at Maryland last year. And, yes, Maryland did eliminate Rutgers from the Big Ten tournament last year. But I don't know that any of that is really going to come into play here. The revenge from last season, which seems like those two things kind of even out a little bit too. I'm just looking at the spot. Rutgers has just played way too many big games in a row, and now they're coming off their biggest win of the season, whereas Maryland, I think, is actually in a bounce-back spot because they're coming off, I believe, a loss, to Ohio State. They went on the road and lost to Ohio State. I mean, there's no real shame in losing on the road to a decent Ohio State team that's a tournament bubble team right now and is probably better than you really think that they are. And Maryland was coming off a big win over Wisconsin the game before that. So Maryland has kind of zigzagged around, really. I know I've played on a lot of Maryland games this year, and I think I've done decent in their games for the most part. So they've kind of zigzagged around. Like I said, they barely got by Nebraska, although they did lose to Northwestern the game before that. So that was two not good performances in a row. Then they upset Illinois, and then turned around and didn't have a great game at Indiana coming off of that, which was a sandwich spot. I believe I was on Indiana in that one, and Indiana definitely had chances to win that game coming off that big win. Then they turned around and they beat Wisconsin. Then they came back out on the road and they lost to Ohio State. So that was a tough spot coming off another big win over Wisconsin. Third road game in 4 games. Fourth road game in 6 games. Difficult spot, and they lost to Ohio State. But now they're back at home, where I do think they're going to bounce back. And like I said, they're undefeated in conference play at home, beating Wisconsin by 8, which isn't by that much. Nebraska by 3. Minnesota by 6. And then their best win at home, which I believe I was on this one too, with UCLA flying cross country by 18 against UCLA. So that was their only win really by this margin here. But then you could also argue that Rutgers is worse than all of those other teams except for Minnesota, maybe. Minnesota is probably worse than Rutgers, I guess, but all those other teams probably a little bit better than Rutgers. Anyway, I think this is a spot where Maryland bounces back. Rutgers is in a letdown spot, so I am on Maryland in this game, minus the points, which I think is actually kind of a cheap number. Matthew, what's up, man? Good to see you again. Slutgers. I apologize for, well, I don't apologize. Well, yeah, I apologize for your Queens team. It looked like a fun time, though, man. Their arena looks like a pretty nice, small arena there. It looks like it's probably fairly new, right? Because they're kind of new to Division One. So it looked like a cool spot there. I am happy that I got the money on that one, though, on Lipscomb. I'm not going to lie about that because I do want to win money. But other than that, I did not have rooting interest in that game. So hopefully you still had fun. George Washington, St. Bonaventure. I also am playing this one on St. Bonaventure, minus 4.5. And this is so similar to the other game. It's crazy, where you have the line having moved down for some reason that is not known to me, because I don't really look at the personnel here. So maybe there are injuries. I don't know. Maybe I should be looking at that, but I just look at the spots, and I just think that even if there is an injury here, I think you're just getting additional value on this team, and maybe they'll just play a little bit harder. So just like with Maryland, the line went down. The cash percentage is still on that team, on Bonaventure here. 65% of the cash, 61% of the tickets. So a little bit more of the cash than the tickets. And Ken Baum has this number at around 6 rather than 4.5. He does have George Washington being a little bit unlucky, but he does have St. Bonaventure as being the better of these two teams, of course, which they are the home favorite for a reason. Where's Bonaventure at? Yeah, he has Bonaventure in the top 100. In the top 100 in defense and almost in the top 100 in offense, which George Washington, that is not going to be the case with them. Where are they at? Even though I just saw them, I'm bouncing all over the place. George Washington actually does have them in the top 100 in defense, but significantly worse in offense. They're at 146th in tempo, whereas Bonaventure plays way slower at 344th. So Bonaventure likes to slow and ugly the game up, and that is not really what George Washington wants to do. They do want to play fast, so you do have the, or faster, I guess. You do have the tempo collision going on in this game, which I think favors the home team. But also, you're looking at George Washington. I think they're kind of in a sandwich spot here, even though Bonaventure does have a good overall record. They haven't been that good in conference. They're below 500 in conference. And George Washington just lost to George Mason for the second time this year by 3 points. George Mason is atop this conference, even though, as I keep saying, I think VCU is really the best team in the conference. But George Washington played George Mason to the wire, basically, in this game. This is a weirdly slow-paced game for a George Washington game. George Mason beat them on the buzzer, I believe, on a buzzer beater in this game. Or it says a go-ahead with 47 seconds left, so it wasn't a buzzer beater, but still. George Washington had a really close game against George Mason. They actually came back in this game. They had to expend a lot of effort late in the game to try to get back in this game. George Mason didn't have a particularly good game, really. Only 35.3% shooting from the field. That's not very good, even though George Washington couldn't hit a three in the game. But still, George Washington played George Mason basically right to the wire, which is a huge game for them. Now they have to go back out on the road for a second road game in 3 games after that tough game. And, oh, yeah, they got VCU up next in 3 days, which is really the best team in the conference. They're sitting at second in conference. So this does kind of look like a sandwich spot to me, whereas I think Bonaventure is definitely going to show up in this one because they're coming off a pretty disgusting loss to Loyola Chicago. And the last time they were at home, they didn't play well against Fordham, barely beating a bad Fordham team. But I think that was because they were feeling pretty high on themselves after beating Dayton the game before that. So Bonaventure had beaten Dayton, huge win. Then they almost lost to Fordham. And then they went out to Loyola Chicago and had one of their worst games, man. Because their only other loss that's actually bad in conference is this LaSalle one, I would say. Duquesne's not bad. George Mason's not bad. VCU's not bad. So LaSalle, that was a weird, inexplicable upset. But Loyola Chicago's not really that bad either. But still, if you lose to a team like that by 24 points, you're going to want to bounce back from that, especially when your last game at home wasn't really that good either. So I think Bonaventure is definitely in a bounce back spot here, whereas I think it's a hangover spot for George Washington. So I'm on St. Bonaventure, -4.5 in that one. The rest of these games, some of these games I don't have quite as much of a feel on, like Xavier Villanova. I have no clue, really. This is not a game I'm playing. Xavier did beat Villanova at home by 6 in the first matchup this year, so it's, I guess, a little bit of in-season revenge for Villanova, and it is a situation where Villanova is going to try to slow the game completely to a crawl because that's what they do at home. Xavier, coming off that win over Georgetown in their last game, not a huge win, so I don't really know how I should approach this game other than to not play it, and Villanova's coming off beating DePaul. Who cares? I mean, as far as Villanova is concerned, what that will do is break their loss streak, though. And people will see that Villanova did just lose to Georgetown. So Xavier just beat Georgetown. Villanova just lost to Georgetown. So it's almost like, well, that means that Xavier, of course, is going to cover, right? Because it's just pick the winner. I wouldn't be so sure about that. I mean, it's tough to win at Villanova just because they slow the game way down. They are down from 4 to 2.5. But again, the market read kind of looks the same as those other 2 games, or even though the line has gone down, 60% of tickets, 91% of the cash on the home team on Villanova, and I do slightly lean that way. I would slightly agree with that, but that's certainly not a play for me. Temple is at Memphis, and this one is interesting because this one is an in-season revenge game where Memphis only has 1 conference loss, and it was to Temple. At Temple, or you can see right here, Temple beat them 88-81, which was back on, when was this? Let me see. January 16th, so not even really that long ago. Temple dealt Memphis their only conference loss, and now Temple's coming off this crazy high-scoring game against South Florida. Second straight road game going to Memphis, and even though Memphis, I really am not sold on Memphis, even though the record is really good. They play in a bad conference. Memphis, their main issue is they constantly turn the ball over. They have one of the worst turnover rates in college basketball. But in this game, I would have to lean to the Memphis side. I mean, they've won a bunch of games in a row, so they're kind of like a rolling train right now. But you know they're going to be highly motivated when they're hosting the only team in the conference that's beaten them. That is a motivator when your only loss in conferences to the next team that you have up here. So I think Memphis is going to show up for this again because that's their only conference loss this season. So I would lean to Memphis in this game, but I'm not going to play it. And the market read looks in opposition to that. It's down from 13 after 13 with juice, 71% of tickets and only 69% of the cash. So the public is on the Memphis side. I'm not going to try to play this one, but I do think that in-season revenge angle where that's your only conference loss is a decent motivator there. So slight lean to Memphis there. Arizona State is coming off that game where they blew it for me against Kansas State after Kansas State, I believe, was coming off that huge upset of Iowa State, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe they'd played multiple big games in a row, whatever it was. I thought Arizona State was in a good spot there, even though they were coming off their big rivalry game against Arizona. And Arizona State started off real hot. It looked like it was going to be a real easy win for me, and then they completely imploded down the stretch. So I don't know how Arizona State's going to respond to that because they're still like sort of on the verge of being a bubble team, but they really need to get some stuff done down the stretch to remain a bubble team. But they kind of can't afford to lose to Oklahoma State. But on the other hand, they might be looking ahead to this Texas Tech game in a few days because if they can get that win, that's going to bolster their resume. So I don't know what to think about this. I mean, they're coming off two big effort games, though, and now going out to an unfamiliar venue because Arizona State is new to this conference. They've been okay on the road, though. I mean, they did win at West Virginia, although they actually did lose all the rest of their road games, except they beat Colorado, but Colorado sucks. And Arizona State used to be, I believe, in the Pac-12 with Colorado not that long ago, so that wasn't an unfamiliar venue for them. Going to Stillwater will be an unfamiliar venue to them, but I don't know how crazy the crowd's going to get there because Oklahoma State's not a very good team. Oklahoma State's coming off only losing to Houston by 9 on the road. So Oklahoma State put in a decent effort in this game, even though they're way behind, though. They're behind double digits. I mean, Houston plays slow, and Houston just kind of, I think, packed it in early and took their foot off the gas and just kind of maintained the lead. That is kind of what Houston does. So I don't know if Oklahoma State's really going to be like totally tired out after that or in any sort of hangover spot or anything like that. So then I would then defer to the market and like what's going on in the market here. Well, Arizona State has actually flipped from a 1-point dog to a pick 'em, going towards being a favorite on the road here. And I'm not sure that I agree with that. 62% of the tickets, 61% of the cash, even though the line is flipped in that direction. Again, we see a lot of weird situations here where the line move is different from where the cash percentage is in a lot of these games. And I have to figure out, do I want to be on the cash percentage? In the case of Maryland, I really think I do. Bonaventure, I mean, it's about the spot. So, yeah. And the Ken Palm numbers line up with those. And then my last game I'll talk about, there's kind of a similar situation there. But this one, I would probably slightly lean to Oklahoma State, to be honest, just because it's a weird venue, unfamiliar venue there. But again, Arizona State's flipped to the favorite, but the cash percentage looks like it's a little bit less on them, even though they are public. Wichita and South Florida. Yeah, I'm going to talk about every one of these games. I'll try to get this done quick. It's not going to be a long video. South Florida just beat Temple, as I said, and they scored 100 points against Temple. So that looks good. That's a good-looking win. You score 100 points. And this game was 2 overtimes, which is why it got up to 100. I mean, the game obviously was not going to reach that score in regulation. For like a team like South Florida, yeah, South Florida, I don't think they could score that well. That doesn't usually happen, but that looks good when you score 100 points. Now they got Wichita, who they already beat on the road by almost 20 points earlier this season, so it's going to be a road revenge spot for Wichita. And Wichita's been playing pretty poorly this year. And who does South Florida have up next? Oh, yeah, they got Memphis, who's the team that's top the conference and the only team that's ranked in the conference, the team that's basically the dominant force in the conference. So this looks like a sandwich spot and a road revenge angle for Wichita. So I was pretty close to playing Wichita here. Wichita finally got a win against Charlotte to break a 4-game loss streak. So that loss streak doesn't look good. They beat Charlotte. Now it's a second straight road game, but I still like the Wichita side here. And this one is pretty close to being a play for me, but I looked at the market. I just really did not like what I saw in the market read here with South Florida up from pick'em to a 1-point favorite with juice. 81% of tickets, 83% of the cash. The money looks like it's coming in South Florida, and I just don't really see why. But I would not agree with that at all. like all the situational angles would put me on Wichita. And then the odds makers are even telling you Wichita is actually the better of these two teams, even though I think South Florida has a slightly better record. The odds makers aren't giving South Florida even close to the full home court here because Wichita is actually the better team, and KenPom does have that being the case. Although I believe he has South Florida being probably the slightly slower paced team, right? Yeah, they're kind of a mid-tempo team, and I think Wichita tries to play fast. Yeah, so South Florida may be able to slow this game down a little bit, so that would worry me a little bit. But Wichita, he does have them as the better team, as I just showed you. He has South Florida almost bottom 200 in both offense and defense, and Wichita is closer to being top 150 in both. So he does definitely have Wichita as the better team, and it is, I believe, a good spot for Wichita. So I definitely lean Wichita. That's my strongest lean that I don't have a play on right now. I do like Wichita in that game. Then we got UMass LaSalle. UMass is coming off a close call against St. Louis. They almost got a win after they beat Duquesne. So they've had a few big games in a row, really. Beating George Washington, not a bad win there. Losing on the road to Rhode Island, who isn't that bad. Beating Duquesne, they're not that bad either. And then having a real close call against St. Louis, who's been one of the better teams in this conference. And now they have to go out on the road and play LaSalle, who they already beat at home by 22 points, and that was even coming off that weird triple overtime game. They still destroyed LaSalle, so I really don't think they're going to have a whole lot of focus on this LaSalle team here, so I think LaSalle would be the lean here, and LaSalle's coming off a 30-point loss to VCU, even though, yeah, I know it's VCU. VCU's the way better team, but you lose by 30 to anybody, I think you are going to want to bounce back from that, so the LaSalle side makes sense to me in this one. UMass is up from Pick'em to Pick'em with juice. 58% of tickets on the bet, 70% of the cash on LaSalle. So the cash percentage looks like it's on LaSalle. I do agree on that one that LaSalle is the right play there. UMass only has Davidson up next, which isn't a huge game, but a lot of the angles that I look for do say LaSalle is the right side there. And then I do have a play in this last game. Nebraska -2.5 is the play. And this line continues to move up, man. It's up to 3 now. So this is a weird one where you see Nebraska's gone from Pick'em to 3, but they got 54% of tickets, 53% of the cash. So I'm not quite sure what's going on with that, with the cash percentage there, because it looks like the money is coming in on Nebraska. And obviously I agree with this one because, as I already just pointed out, I think Ohio State's in a letdown spot because they just beat Maryland and they were coming off a game where they were on a roll, man. I mean, they upset Purdue, and then they hadn't lost. They didn't suffer the letdown, and they beat Iowa easily, went on the road, beat Penn State easily. Second straight road game, they actually almost beat Illinois. They played Illinois really tough, and they had the lead for more than half of this game, leading them with like 7 minutes to go. Ohio State still had the lead in this game. Then they had a moment where they just went completely silent for like multiple minutes of the game. So Ohio State was coming off that big game against Illinois. Then they turned around and they upset Maryland at home. I think this was an upset. I assume it was. Oh, it wasn't. Ohio State was actually a small favorite at home, so close to being an upset. But looks like an upset as far as the rankings. Ohio State is definitely not the better team over Maryland. But that was like close to a pick'em type of game. But that's a big game for Ohio State. And I know it wasn't their biggest win because they did beat Purdue already. And they did have a win over Kentucky earlier this year. And they did fine in the games after those, but I just don't think this is a good spot for them. It's a third road game in 4 games. They don't have anything big up next against Washington, but still, I don't think it's a good spot. And Nebraska has really been pretty strong at home up until they hit this weird speed bump where they had 2 bad home games against Rutgers and USC, but then they turned it back on and they beat Illinois in their last home game. Then they went out on the road and they beat Oregon. Then what I thought was going to be the big letdown spot, they actually still won against Washington. And Washington blew a lead in the game, and Nebraska wound up kind of running away with it. And now Nebraska's back at home facing Ohio State. I think it's a pretty decent spot for Nebraska. Coming back home here, it would be better if they had played ugly at home in their last game, but still, they've lost 2 of their last 3 home games, so I do think they want to kind of redeem themselves from that. Going back to last year, they've been quite good at home. Otherwise, they beat Indiana at home by a ton earlier this year, although Indiana's not great. They beat UCLA at home this year already, so it looks like they hit just a little bit of a weird speed bump with that Rutgers game and then the USC game, they were coming off a pretty big performance against Maryland, so maybe that kind of explains that one. But in general, Nebraska is pretty tough to beat at home. Ohio State, I believe, is not in a very good spot, so I like Nebraska here. Ken Baum only has Nebraska winning this game, I think, by 1, so 3 is a little bit dicey. Ohio State, he does have pretty good at 27th in the country, so he does have them as the better team, which the odds makers are telling you that, but the teams are pretty similar defensively. Ohio State is definitely the better scoring team. And they play similar tempo, kind of like a mid to slow tempo. And Nebraska is the team that has more luck, according to Ken Baum. But still, this is just about the spot. I just think it's a tough spot. Nebraska is still pretty good at home, in my opinion. And Ohio State, coming off that big win, I think it makes sense to play Nebraska here. And that is what I'm going to do. So that's going to do it, man. Those are my plays in college basketball. Let's go over to NHL. We only have 2 games in the NHL before we go into, I don't know if this is the All-Star break or what it is, because then they're actually going to be, I don't know, these world games where Team Canada faces Team Sweden and Team USA faces Team Finland, and then there's probably like a final after that, so players will be playing for their countries in whatever that is. I don't even know what they call it, but whatever's going on. NHL takes a break, but their players will be playing in that stuff. But today we got Utah at Washington. Utah played yesterday and got pretty much embarrassed by Carolina, 7-3. Not a good game for Utah, but they are playing with no rest here, having to go to Washington, and Washington didn't play yesterday. Washington's the better team, so I don't know what I would do with this game. Washington, of course, is going to be public. They're down from -205 to -189. They got 96% of tickets, 98% of the cash on them. So it looks like there is some reverse line movement, though, against Washington, but I'm not going to try to play Utah, even though they did get embarrassed yesterday. Utah playing 2 straight games with no rest, with Washington having rest. No thanks. I'll skip it. And then Tampa is at Montreal. Both of these teams played yesterday. I did play on Tampa yesterday, and they got what was a pretty big win, really, against Detroit, because Tampa and Detroit are both fighting for like wild card spots at this point. So that was a pretty big win for Tampa over Detroit there, and it ended a nice hot streak for Detroit, I'm pretty sure. Now Tampa has to go up to Montreal. Doesn't look like the greatest spot for them. Montreal also did play yesterday, but they lost badly. They lost 4-0 to Montreal, or excuse me, to New Jersey at Montreal. So Montreal doesn't have travel. They're staying at home. So Montreal is in the better spot of these two, but the money is coming in on Tampa Bay, up from -145 to -167. 83% of tickets, 92% of the cash on them. I don't understand why that is. I don't know if Montreal's, maybe they're just resting one of their goalies or something, but their rookie goalie that they have there or whatever hasn't really been that bad for them. So I think if you just look at the spot, it looks like a better spot for Montreal to me. So I would slightly lean to Montreal and grabbing them as the home underdog in that one, but not a play, obviously. Stacks, what's up, man? And then we have NBA. We have a few NBA games today, 3 games, and mostly they're not very interesting. Charlotte is at Detroit. Let me see. Detroit's up from 9.5 to 10, 53 with juice, 53% of tickets, but 90% of the cash coming back on Charlotte. I don't know what I would do with this game, to be honest. Charlotte did just beat San Antonio, which was a decent win, and that will break another loss streak that they had, so maybe that'll help give them some momentum. And they are starting a road trip here, so starting a road trip, you usually do want to be focused to start the road trip off right, so that may be the case with Charlotte here. So they're actually kind of in a positive spot. Detroit just beat Philadelphia after playing Cleveland. I thought Detroit was going to be in a letdown spot because they lost on like a ridiculous Garland buzzer beater against Cleveland, and they played Atlanta top the game before that. Then they turned around and they beat Philadelphia, which was actually without Cade Cunningham, who's the best player on Detroit, so they were without him, and they still did that. And now Cunningham, that was an injured player theory spot. Then I lost on that one because I didn't realize Cunningham was going to be out, but I thought it was a bad spot for Detroit after almost beating Cleveland. Now I think Detroit is actually kind of in a bad spot, and Cunningham may be coming back in this one, so it'll become a reverse injured player spot as well. He's game time decision, but if Detroit's a 10-point favorite, you got to think Cunningham probably is playing in this game. But I think it's a bad spot, actually, for Detroit. So this one I do lean to taking the points with the Hornets, even though I haven't played it. Again, it's them starting a road trip up against Detroit, really coming off 3 big games in a row, and probably getting their star player back in this game. And if they won easily without him, I think you tend to get a little bit complacent when he comes back into the lineup. So it may not be a very focused spot for Detroit there. So I agree with the cash percentage on that one. I agree with Charlotte in that one, plus the points. Toronto's coming off a game where they lost to Oklahoma City. Now they're playing a second straight road game, going to Houston. Houston played yesterday, and they lost. They were one of my losses yesterday, man. Just, I don't know what to tell you about that one. I thought it was a spot to fade Dallas. Houston has now lost 6 games in a row, and now they're playing on a back-to-back, a third game in 4 days, a fourth game in 6 days, a fifth game in 7 days, all in different cities, and they're returning home from a road trip, and they have bigger games up next against Phoenix, Golden State, Minnesota. So, yeah, it is a bad spot for Houston. And coming off, a game against Dallas that is a big game. I mean, it's a Texas rivalry game there, and they had another game on the first there, so they're playing 6 games in 9 days or something. So that's just ridiculous, man. The schedule has been insane for Houston, so they are in a terrible rest spot. And as I always say, when you return home from a road trip, you tend to not be very focused because you have stuff to do at home. Although I think when you have no days off, I think it actually mitigates that a little bit because you kind of just play through and you don't have time to start getting stuff done yet at home. And maybe they'll worry about that after this game because they have 3 days off. So maybe the return home spot won't be as much of a distraction. But Houston is certainly a team that's very unrested right now. Whereas Toronto, I mean, they've had more of a break here, like I showed you. So I lean against Houston in this one, if that wasn't obvious. But Houston does have the cash percentage, 83% of the cash and only 65% of the tickets, sitting in a 9-point favorite. I don't agree with that cash percentage. I would only look to take the points with Toronto in that one, but I'm not playing it. And then the best game today, I guess, because those other 2 games are such crap, is Philadelphia and Milwaukee. And you got to pay attention to who's playing for Philadelphia. Perk, my man, former Boston Celtic champion back in 2008, is ripping into the Sixers, I guess, because they just have no chemistry right now, man. Embiid seems like a head case. Paul George is just injured way too much. So, yeah, the 76ers obviously have problems. When the guys are there and they're playing, they don't play that badly, though, usually when all their guys are there. But you got to see who's playing for Philadelphia. They're coming off that loss to Detroit, like I said. They probably want to try to split this road trip at least and go 1-1. Tough ass to beat Milwaukee on the road, though, obviously. You got to pay attention to see if Embiid is playing here and if George is playing. I think Embiid is really the only one who's questionable, I would say. I think he's a game-time decision. I think George played in this last one. Actually, I guess Embiid did play in this one, too. So he's just always listed as a game-time decision, man. So I don't know. So I think Philadelphia is 7-4 or something straight up when they played all 3 of their big 3, which is Embiid, George, and Maxey. When all 3 of them have been in the lineup, they are 7-4, including that last game where they lost. So we'll see if that has anything to do with it. Milwaukee is also coming off a loss at Atlanta. And kind of a tough game, but they're returning home from a road trip. And I don't like teams returning home from road trips. Although this one was only 3 games, and it was less than a week, and it didn't really take them that far. So I don't consider that to be like a huge road trip return angle there. So I don't think it's that bad of a spot for Milwaukee. I don't even know, man. I mean, the market read is also tough on this one because the Sixers have flipped from a 2-point dog to a 1.5-point favorite. But that move might be because it might have been 2 when Embiid, when there was uncertainty around Embiid, and now the line move it might not be actual professional bettors, if you know what I mean. It might just be because the books had to move it because of the Embiid situation, and if they know he's going to play where it was uncertain before, that might be why the line moved, because otherwise you see 55% of the tickets and 90% of the cash on the Bucks. So I think the way to read the market here is that the actual money is coming in on the Bucks side. I don't even know if I agree with that, but the Philadelphia 76ers, they're such a tough handicap. It's such a mess right now that I probably wouldn't want to deal with that, even though I don't really want to have anything to do with Milwaukee in a return home spot either. So again, I'm passing on all that. That's going to do it for this video, man. My plays, one more time, are all in college basketball. Maryland minus 9.5. St. Bonaventure minus 4.5. Nebraska minus 2.5. And then go watch my Super Bowl video that is out that I did last night that has all of my Super Bowl opinions. I gave out opinions where I lean to the Chiefs and the under on the side of the total, but I think the under is a little bit dangerous, really. So I think the stronger of those two is definitely the Chiefs side if I had to pick. I'm not playing either of those in my actual plays. You can go watch my analysis one more time, or all these props. No score in the first 6 minutes, -124. Shortest touchdown under 1.5 yards, -175. Either team to score 3 consecutive times, -155. Xavier Worthy receptions over 5 at -137, although you have to pay a way higher price now on that one because it is an over. So if you want to go up to the over 5.5, I would not disagree with you if you did that. And Saquon Barkley under rushing yards, under 112.5 is where it stands right now. But we'll see if we can get a better number on that throughout the day. That's going to do it for me. Thanks, guys, for hanging out. Tower Gang Toad. Once again, go follow the Tower Gang podcast. Patreon.com/Tower Gang. You get bonus content, live pre-show, post-show. Hang out with us in a Telegram, and let's have a fun Super Bowl Sunday, man. And we'll eat some chicken and watch the game, and hopefully we win some money on this game as well. I mean, I'm not putting too much at stake with these props, but it's like the equivalent of 1 2/3 normal bets for me across all 5 of those props. So hopefully it wins rather than loses, but I mean, I don't expect to get crushed on the Super Bowl or to have a huge win on the Super Bowl. You never want to put like a ton of money on one game just because it is the Super Bowl, so go check out my video. I talked about some fun props in there too, and some other ways to think about other props and how to think about props in general and whatever, and think about the Super Bowl in general. So go check that out. That video is up on the channel, and that's going to do it. Thanks, guys. Peace.